Hello everyone. In this episode, I'd like to talk to you about version control, specifically how you can use it in conjunction with Unreal Engine. Version control is one of those very deep topics, so I'm going to cover the concepts here, the basics. I'm going to show you how to use it with a text editor, just with a simple text file, and then we're going to have a look at how this works in the context of Unreal Engine. It's not restricted to just Unreal Engine. I mean, many coders use it for all kinds of projects, but technically it works with any kind of file. So you can use it to keep track of multiple versions of your creative file. So what I sometimes do is I have a folder in which lots of projects files reside, like a DAZ Studio file, Marvelous Designer file, several OBJs, maybe a Blender file, maybe some Photoshop files, and so forth. And if I make a change to any of them, then I can go and just version control that and just lock that in so I can go back to a previous version of these files. There are two main benefits of version control. One is as a safety net if you're developing something yourself. Doesn't matter if it's an Unreal Engine project or another coding project or anything you do. It gives you that extra safety net because if you hit Control S on any application, it'll overwrite a file that may have been valuable and is wiped out forever. If you ever wanted to bring that back, unless you have made a copy and saved iterations of that file, you're screwed. There's no way you can bring that back. And on complex coding projects, it's not just one file that you're saving, it's multiple. So if you're over-saving something that has worked with something that no longer works, you're kind of maneuvering yourself into a corner, and it'll be very difficult to get out of that rut unless you have a complete backup of a complete version of your project. It'll be very difficult to undo changes that have now broken the complex project. The second benefit of version control is that you can easily collaborate with people. So you can share your code via something like GitHub or any of the other services, and then invite other people to make changes to your code without actually overwriting your code. So that's very elegant. I'm not going to focus on that part in this tutorial, but we'll cover that maybe at a later stage. Let me show you the basic concepts here with just with Clip Studio Paint. This is just a drawing program. So the way this works in principle, and there are chapter points in this video, by the way, if you want to jump ahead or jump around, feel free to have a look at those. So in principle, you have an application. We'll just call this app, and it can be literally anything. So it can be Unreal Engine, which has these features built in, but it can also be anything else or even multiple applications. Like I said, DAZ Studio, Marvelous Designer, Photoshop, any of these things can do that. And that usually saves something to your operating system. So let me go and make this the kind of a folder icon here. That's what that's supposed to be. So this is the, let me call it FS for file system. So this is literally your Mac Finder or your Windows Explorer here. And when you press Control S, then a file is saved onto your operating system, thereby overwriting existing files. So version control intercepts this process here. So I'll call it maybe VCS. The most popular of them right now is Git, so I will go and name that here as well. But know that there are others. So Git isn't the only one, but that's the one that I'm going to be showing you here. So this process of saving a file from your application into your file system can be intercepted, or not so much intercepted, but there's going to be an additional save as process involved here with version control. So whatever is saved here can now be committed as something like version 1 of this. And then as you make a change here and then hit Control S again on one or multiple files, version control will detect that and say, okay, this is different to what I've just saved here. So it'll flag that up. And you now have the option that when it suits you to save this as version 2 and so forth, as many times as you like. So the common scenario is that you make a change and you hit Control S, you save it. Like on an Unreal Engine project, you would run the project, which would save all the files. And then you run it and you say, my project isn't working anymore. Then you can just tell version control, hey, undo all the changes. Whatever this folder currently looks like, bring back the last commit that I've made here that I know was working. And at that point, the contents of the folder get swapped out with the previous version of your files, and your app should really detect that. If it doesn't, then there's usually kind of a refresh mechanism or whatever. And at that point, your project will be working again, as all your bad changes have been wiped out again by version control. That's kind of neat. So the other benefit that version control offers is that you can now go and put this code that you've version controlled onto something like a cloud storage, something like GitHub, for example. But there are other ways of doing it. So Git is not the only way to version control something. There's also Perforce or Plastic or Subversion. These are all different services that they don't use Git. Git is this command line tool under the hood that makes this magic possible. So you can go and share this code with the cloud as a backup. That's kind of nice. If your local computer gets wiped out, you always have a backup in the cloud. But most importantly, other people can then go and download that code from the cloud and collaborate with you. So this could be your team. And at that point, they can make changes that they can also go and recommit to the same GitHub repository that you can then also bring into your current version control and then try out what they've done in their own time. So common scenario is that a coder works with an artist and the artist provides the assets here this way. So they'll put the assets and you might be the coder and you do the code. And therefore you guys can collaborate on a project. And that's kind of nice because you can share all these assets. Repositories in the cloud can be public or private. One thing of note, while it would be great to make everything public and collaborate with anyone and everyone, there is always that consideration of copyright when you deal with 3D assets. So be a bit careful with that. So by license agreement, it's usually okay to share assets with a collaborator, but it's not okay to share them with the public. So I can't go and buy Cinti assets on the store and then go and make my project publicly available for everyone, because then everyone has access to the assets and that's not good for the Cinti guys, for example. Just as an aside there. Let's have a look how this works with a concrete example. So I'm going to go and show this to you on a regular text file, perhaps. I've created an empty folder on my desktop and just called it git test. That's this one here. In it, I have a single text file, which is just called test.txt. Just so that when I double click it, I can show you what's inside it. It just says one line of text and that says this is a test. Sadly, it doesn't stay as large as this. So, if it goes smaller, then you know why. On the right-hand side here, I have a little GUI tool, which is called GitHub for Desktop. That's one of the tools that you can use to administer these things with an interface, but there is also a command line tool available should you want to look into that. It's much more flexible than the GUI tool, so this is not a very good one, but we'll cover the pros and cons of that a little bit later. Right now, I can see that my Git repository is already added here, and the tool tells me that I have a change in this file, so it didn't know this file yet. This is the file. It can display certain files, but not all of them. Like binary files, it wouldn't be able to display. So right now I can go and make a commit of this. It's only one line of text, and I might just go and do that. This is going to be my first version. Usually you wouldn't call this something like first version. You would call this something meaningful, like implemented new GUI feature or added so-and-so characters or whatever you've done there. You can also give a description here if you like. I'm going to dispense with that and just say commit to master. We'll figure out later what that all means. This takes a moment, and now there are no more changes here in the GitHub tool. And that means version control says that whatever changes are in this file, I've already got saved underneath my hood there. It offers to publish this repository to GitHub if you want to do that, but we'll cover that later. So now if I go back to my text file, and I might go and amend my text with something like, added new code here as an example. Then I'm having a second line of text. I'm going to hit Control S to save that, and I can go and close this down now and switch back over to my version control tool, which acknowledges, hey, this is the previous version, this is the new version. What do I want to do with this? If this was a feature that works, and this is kind of what I'm encouraging you to do, if you're now looking at your project and you're saying, yep, everything works as expected, then you can choose to make a commit. So this doesn't happen automatically. You have to manually make an effort to make that commit there. So if I'm saying, okay, this is great, this is now going to be, new code works fine, or added working feature, for example, I'll say commit to master, and then once again version control has saved this as another version. Under history over here, you can see literally a history of all your versions. This was my previous commit. The top one is the latest commit. And if it can, it will display the changes there. It'll also read out descriptions for you if you wanted to take a look at, hey, what was it that I've actually done there? So this is kind of the regular workflow there. And currently everything is fine. But what happens if something goes wrong? And this is really where version control comes in handy. Imagine now that I'm screwing something up. So I'm going to go and open this again, and I'm going to go and say screwing things up, like royally. So imagine I now run my Unreal Engine project, or I see that my file is now, Control S has been saved, and oh my God, my project isn't working. Then what you would do is you would not make a commit. So you go back over to version control, and you can see it acknowledges that there is a change, but you don't want to make a commit now. You also don't really want to undo your changes. What you want to do now to bring this back into a working state to the previous version that we had saved here, I can go and click on either a single file. If you're working with multiple files, you'll see multiple here. You can either right click on this and say discard changes. That'll just be on this file. Or you can right click on this top bar here and say discard all changes. So this is now going to go and remove whatever the Control S operation just done and go back to the previous version that we had made a commit on. So do that. It says, are you sure you want to discard all changes? So it'll list all the files. It discard all changes. You say yes. And then you can see that apparently there are no changed files anymore. And my application is now going to be presented with a new set of files, namely the previous one that's working. So let's go and double click this and see if we're correct. Yes, look at that. This is a test. Added new code here as an example. And the last line where I said I've royally screwed it up is no longer there, and my project is working again. So that's how this works with a simple text file. But of course, if you're working with complex projects like an Unreal Engine project, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So let me go and close this down, open up Unreal Engine, and just create a first-person project just so that we have something to play with. We're going to put it under version control, and then we're going to go and make some changes and show you how that workflow works. Okay, here we go. This is a first-person project. I can play it, and I can go and shoot at things, and things are obviously working fine. So this is not surprising because it's the first time I'm running this, and it's just a demo template, so that's all good. So the first thing in Unreal Engine that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to place the initial project under version control. This is one of those things that the GUI client, that I'll show you where to get that in a minute, that doesn't offer, which is like one of the most basic functionalities, and I'm really annoyed that it doesn't do that. But thankfully, Unreal Engine does this, so that's a major plus for Unreal Engine. To do that, to put a project under version control, you don't have to copy it anywhere. It'll happen literally in the folder in which it's saved. It's here on this menu here, source control. You click that, and then you have a little drop down that comes up. You hit connect to source control, and that will do that. That's necessary the first time you want to place something under version control. Connect to source control, and then you get the choice of picking something that you want to do here. So click this and pick Git beta version. These are all the other version control options that Unreal Engine supports. We're going to deal with Git. It says beta version because it doesn't support all the features that Git has to offer, but it supports the most basic ones, and this is what we're going to work with. So there we go. The path to Git is here, so I have it installed. I will show you where to get the command line tools just so that you know it. In case you don't have it, you can navigate there. Add a git ignore file. I would basically leave all the defaults in place and just hit this button at the bottom which says initialize project with Git. You do that, and depending on the size of your project, this might take a moment or so. And then we can say accept settings. At the bottom right here, I can see that there's lots of messages popping up, and that is literally just all the files that are now being added to the version control. This can take some time if you have a large project that you're placing under version control for the first time. Hit accept settings, and that is it. That's your project now under version control. Let me just go into any of the folders down here. I'm going to use first person BP and maps because this is our current level here. This is that level. You may already be familiar with that little star or asterisk icon. That means something isn't saved. So that's just Unreal Engine's way of saying something isn't saved. There'll be other icons that we'll know about in a moment. This usually happens when you make a change to either code or whatever. Then any of these files here, also the ones that are open here, they get this little asterisk, and that means that file is currently not saved. So before you commit something to version control, you need to make sure your application has saved everything. So let's see what happens if we go File, Save All. That'll save any file that has a change inside Unreal Engine. And that's done that. So now that asterisk has gone away, but we find a new icon here at the top right. Maybe I'll just make this a little bit larger here so that we see this a little bit better. This icon means that this is a version controlled file, but version control will tell you this hasn't been committed to a version just yet. So if we wanted to do that, obviously there has been a change since we've made our initial commit. You can head over to this little icon again and say submit to source control. So anything that may have changed as a result here will be now locked in. Unreal Engine is going to check the assets and it will say, yep, this is the one file that has in fact had a change. And it will let you now give it a change list description here, which is literally the first icon that I've shown you there under the commit message. So I'm going to say working version, everything works well. So anything will do that will remind you of what you've done there. You can also, if you had multiple files, you can make several commits depending on the files. You can commit several files independently. Usually you don't do that when you get started, but as your changes get more advanced and you haven't had a commit for a while, then you might want to split that up. So I've changed some assets around in the map, but I've also changed some code around in something else. You might want to split those up if you're absolutely sure that you know what you're doing. Hit submit, and that will now create a new commit on version control. It even says this here, committed to master and a hash, working version, everything works fine. So that's that. So Unreal Engine can do that. It can support you while you're making changes and you can submit changes to version control. What it cannot do is roll back these changes. So you need to have an external tool for that. But that's okay. It doesn't have to run all the time. So my tool that I had here was the GitHub for Desktop tool. So let's go and add this Unreal Engine project to this tool so that I can have this discard changes option here in the version control tool. So let's see how that works. Up here under file, I can now add a local repository to that. I can create new repositories with this tool as well, but they have to be in an empty folder and it'll basically create an empty folder for you. So it's kind of useless for pretty much every operation that you do, but one of those things. So add local repository is what we want to do. Clone would be if you're grabbing something from an online source. We don't want to do that either. Add local repository, and then you go and navigate to the location of your Unreal Engine project. So in my case, it was probably under storage, Unreal projects, and I called this git test. Perfect. You'll usually notice a hidden folder .git, and that's the folder that Git uses under the hood to keep track of all these files. So we never have to go in there. It's just, just an aside that this is what Git uses to save versions of files. Kind of, don't look in there. It's scary. So you say select folder, and it will say, okay, great, I found something here. If you pick a directory where no version control is present, it will let you know. I'll say add repository, and that is that. Now we can go to history and I can see the two previous commits that I've made with Unreal Engine. This was the one where I checked everything in, the initial commit. That looks a little bit scary because it'll grab all the assets in your current directory. And if you have binary assets, like a lot of game assets and stuff, that is, it'll take some time for that to happen. Working version, everything works well. This is what I've just made there with Unreal Engine, and it knows that's also committed. I have currently no changes, which is awesome. So let's go back to Unreal Engine and make a change that we can then come back to. So perhaps I'm going to go and bring in a sphere into my map. I'm going to go and maybe make that larger, put that to the ground here. Maybe I'll go and use make it yellow. That's awesome. I'll do that, and I'll go and make a couple of copies. Great, this is my amazing change here. And I can run the project. I can go and see, yeah, perfect. There's two massive yellow spheres in my project. I'm totally super happy about that. Let me go and save either the current, or in fact, even better, if you've made a change in multiple files, head over to Save All. Control-Shift-S is the shortcut key for that. And once you've done that, Unreal Engine will tell me, yeah, these files here, as an example, will have changed. You could have also done something like, maybe you're in the, in the level blueprint, and you've made changes here. That is also possible. So maybe you put a branch node into something here, and whatever, there was a print string, and things are just not working out. So this is another change you could have made. Compile and save, and maybe go just close that, because it's not going to have an impact on our project. Let me go over to source control and say this is still something that works. Let's just try it again. Yeah, perfect. This is all. It totally works still. That's awesome. So let's go and commit this change. Submit to source control. This lets me know some files have changed, and I'm going to say still working fine. So this is what you'd be doing. You make changes on your project. You say commit this continuously to source control if and when you make a major change that you would kind of see yourself as a little bit of a milestone there. So now I'm going to make a change that might break the project. That might not be good. So I might go and bring in I might go and bring in a third sphere. And that is, of course, super evil. Maybe even 2 spheres here, like vast amounts of spheres. And I'll go and save all, and I might find, hey, dang, my project is no longer working the way I wanted it. Maybe those 4 spheres, they really screw things up. I've done something to the code that was totally bad, and I should have thought better about it. Then you can go back to your GUI editor, so GitHub for desktop. And here you can just go and say the top thing here, right click on it and say discard all changes. Let's do that. Do you want to discard everything? It says the first person example map.umap had changes. So let's go and discard all of that. And now I'm back to my previous version, which would be still working fine here. Now, Unreal Engine hasn't quite picked up on that yet, because it doesn't know that an external file has changed. Sometimes it understands that, sometimes it does not. Especially with assets, it's often very clever to say, hey, this has been changed or this has been added. Would you like to import it into the project? With code files and with level files, it's not quite so clever. So we have a way to make it look at the currently saved file and update its assets. And that's here in the file browser. So if this menu isn't open here, then it's this little icon here. If you have something like this, you probably want to just open that, because it lets you granularly, just like in my case, I know that the change has been in this directory, so I can go to the directory, right click, and then say sync. So that'll do it for any file in this directory. I could also go and do it on the whole content, but that'll take significantly longer. If you know there aren't any changes in many of my other directories, then I might as well not ask Unreal Engine to reload all those files. So I'm going to make my life a little bit faster here. Just click on Maps, right click, and say sync. And Unreal Engine thinks about it for a second. Sometimes it might even crash, but now I bring my project back to the version that had 2 yellow balls, and everything should be working fine again. That is kind of neat. That's really how it works with Unreal Engine, and it's really, really nice to have these tools built in, and every time you make a major change where you think, pizzazz, I've made something that works and my project still works, that's awesome, you can go and commit this to source control, and that'll be a version that'll be locked in. No matter how badly you screw it up from there on in, you'll be able to bring it back with that GUI editor. Speaking of which, let me show you where you can get that from. So it's an essential tool that you'll need in order to bring this back. So there's actually 2 essential tools that I recommend you get. The first one is from here, git-scm.com. This is the command line tool that will let you tell Unreal Engine where Git is. So Git, I don't think it ships with Unreal Engine. You have to install it manually, but you can do that under here, under downloads. There are packages for Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. So you just go and download that and then install it in the default directory, and that'll make a command line tool available. So just in case you don't know what a command line tool is, if you go to the search bar and type in CMD or command prompt here, then this is the command line. That's often a little bit scary, but hackers like me like it. And on here, you'll be able to type Git, and then you'll be able to use the command line tools directly from here. So if you want to put something under version control from here, you can do that. You can bring previous commits back. That is all possible with the command line tool. And Unreal Engine needs it in order to operate properly with Git. So you type in Git, and then if you don't get an error message, if you get a list of commands, then it's properly installed. This is not a GUI tool, however, so the GUI tools are listed over here under GUI client. So there's quite a lot of them. And the first one that is listed is in fact GitHub for desktop. That's made by the friendly people at github.com. which is a free cloud storage and social coding destination. So on the desktop.github.com, you'll get the version for your current operating system. There's also one for macOS and for, I believe, Linux. Is that available? No, just Windows and macOS. Okay, cool. And this is what it looks like, just like what I've shown you. You'll install that, and that is this tool here that will let you add a repository to this management tool. And its main purpose really is to let you easily push files to your own GitHub account. It's maybe a little bit complicated here, but github.com is this website here that lets you store repositories and let people browse them. Let me go and show you my GitHub page here. So I have several hundred repositories here. And if you would go to github.com/verse-lewis, then you will see them all. That's my GitHub page here. And in it here, people can star things, people can make branches of it, people can go and send you pull requests. So this is all kind of groovy here. And if you click on any of these, like this one here, then you will be able to browse the code. So you can have a README page that explains a little bit about the project, what it does. There's kind of notes to your future self as well as to other people if you want to share this with people. And you can go and browse the code here. So you can go and literally go into here and then browse code files like this. So in Unreal Engine, we'll be able to see underlying C++ files and all that. Binary files can also be saved, and you can then go and share this link with other people who will then be able to clone it and run this code on their own machine, including assets. You can also keep these private so that you can just collaborate with a few private people. But yeah, this is what you need. You need to have the GitHub for desktop client, and then that'll be able to let you undo changes. So the other thing that this GUI client doesn't let you do is if I wanted to go back to my initial commit here, for example, I can click on it, but I can't browse back there. So I can't make this client swap out my files in the directory with this here. Sadly, they don't support that. They do support branches. So if you've heard of branches, those are kind of neat development aids that if you're working on a scary feature, you might not want to do this on your main branch. You want to create a separate branch for that and keep making commits until you're happy that this is something that works. And then you can go and merge it into the current branch, or you can go and abandon the branch and say, hey, that wasn't such a good idea. I've worked a week on something that's now broken. It's one of those things, So branches are supported. Tags are not one of those things. For what we need, oh dear, my project isn't working. Let me bring back the changes from the previous version that has worked. It'll work fine. I hope this was helpful. As I said, I'm going to put chapter points into the description so that you can jump into each section if you want to rewatch it. I strongly encourage you to look into version control, especially when you're working with Unreal Engine. It's really nicely integrated and you don't need an external tool to get started, but you do build yourself that safety net. As your project grows, and if at one point you want to collaborate with other people, then you can just go and share this online and give them the link rather than having 12 people passing around zip files. That's just going to be messy fast, trust me. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. If you have, then do let me know. Other than that, I will hopefully see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.